And we should be live. So this is Dean Tedder with the Two Party Podcast. I'm here with Barbara, and I will probably mess the name up, but I'm going to try it. Braendlein?
You know, it's not bad. It's honestly, there are so many superfluous letters in my last name. I feel like if you could pronounce it right the first time, it would probably mean that you couldn't read. It's pronounced Braendlein.
Braendlein. Okay. Yeah. So now I mess everyone's name up lately. It's just like, it's becoming the trend of the podcast, you know?
This is a really hard one. You shouldn't get this one right. So.
Right. Well, yeah, it is a challenging one. I will give it that. So again, we have Barbara with us today, and we want to touch on a few things. But first, I want you to just go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, where you grew up, stuff like that, just so they can kind of get a feel for who you are.
Well, I'm a Washington State farm kid first. I grew up on an apple orchard on the eastern side of the state. Most people think of Washington, they think of evergreens and rains all the time. But the part of the state that I grew up in, it never stops shining, just constant sun. So I went on and I married a farmer. We now raise vegetables on the west side of the state. I have 4 special needs kids, and I homeschool them. I did have a book published this last year, and it is basically a fictionalized version of my adventures raising kids with mitochondrial disease. And that's a lot of my life right there. Is we have an adventurous life, I would say, in the quietest of ways.
That's very cool, and it's interesting because we were just talking before we started recording, and it's very interesting because my wife and I just chose this year to homeschool. And as we were discussing, it's had its challenges for sure. My wife's we are polar opposites. Now, she comes from a very, Christian background, really has done nothing wrong in her whole entire life. I call her Mother Teresa sometimes. Myself, at the actual opposite side of the street. So I am literally, if there's something you could name that has been done that shouldn't be, I'm the guy that was like, watch this, hold my beer, and I'm doing it, or I've done it. And so when we first started this journey, and we kind of touched a little bit on this, is it was, at first it was me, like the concerns, my kid's not going to get socialization, or, will he get enough exercise? What part of it is he losing out on? And my wife, on the other hand, she's like, now she suffers from glaucoma, so she's had to literally, this year she's been diagnosed legally blind, so we're really working on getting her health care better. So she's actually not able to work, and so she was like, I'll stay home and we'll try this homeschool thing this year. We'll try it out now, because my son's been misbehaving and stuff, but we just thought this would be the time to try it. And so on her end, she's very structured. Everything's organized in our house. Everything has a place. She's very good at that. I am not. I come in, she yells at me. I'm worse than my son, who's in 6th grade, 12 years old. I come in the house and I'm just throwing stuff everywhere. Everything's a landing spot. I don't know if it's a guy thing or if it's just so it drives her crazy. But she's got, since we started, it's just been, so far it's been good. There's days where, I think the learning curve or maybe the transition into homeschool is a change for him. So there's days where he bucks the system and he's just like not having it. But for the most part, he's doing really well, and his teacher thinks he's doing really well. He's always caught up. And I think that's what I was, obviously that's what you're always hoping for. But in my mind, I think over the years, I always thought like this would be a nightmare to have to do this. And you say you're doing it, and you say with 4 kids?
I do have 4 kids. And in our case, we ended up, I have a lot of compassion for the people that got thrown into this through COVID, because right. When, my kids have some complicated medical issues, and that was a big part of why we started homeschooling at the beginning, is they just couldn't make it through a school day without getting incredibly sick, or a couple of my kids are tube fed. The transition is hard. I just feel like encouragement to your wife. Everybody's going to have bad days. Yeah. Everybody's going to have those days where you're like, what we should really do? Bake cookies and stop. And that's the beauty of homeschooling, is that you can decide if this is the hill that we need to die on today.
And she's finally kind of coming to terms with that after these past few weeks of it starting. She's finally like, well, you know what? I don't have to stick to that schedule of sending him in anymore. Like, he doesn't have to go in at 10 o'clock and work for an hour or so on work. I can just say, let's go do something else.
Yeah, it's the total freedom, I think. And that's probably, if I had, I don't know if I have the years to qualify as wisdom yet. So, but if I had a word that I would give to someone, it's that we kind of have to shift our mindsets a bit from thinking about, I'm doing school, right? So that means, because like in my mind, that means we're going to be sitting at the table for this amount of time. I should probably get one of those old school desks that has the chair connected, like school. And I think that that is daunting. Yeah. But if you start to think of your home instead of, you don't compete with a school. You don't have a piano lab. You don't have a science lab. All these things that we think of as, right, a school. What you have is an educational environment. Right. And the fact is, your home is that, whether you're meaning to or not. Mm-hmm. Kids are constantly learning just being in your home. So it's really a decision to do that on purpose. Yeah. Like to go ahead and be deciding that if, some of the most fascinating homeschoolers I have met are people that they go ahead and they take it to the logical extreme, and they say, you know what, I have a family of, make up a hypothetical, of ADHD boys. Yep. We should not be sitting for 8 hours at a table every day. It could be that we should be doing our multiplication tables while we're hiking. Yeah. And you can. Like, there's just no, why not? Yeah. The point is that they're learning. And I think that when we can shift from thinking, school to thinking education, then it just opens up a world of opportunity.
For sure. And I think a good, sometimes it's hard to get this point across. And it was for me, is the thinking of traditional brick and mortar school and what you learn there in the curriculum, and what, as a homeschool, the freedoms you have to teach, like you said, to go on a hike, to go in the, do things that are outside the traditional norm of a brick and mortar, and which at the end of the day, great system. The curriculums are always I've always conflicted with the curriculums of a brick and mortar. But at the end of the day, to be able to challenge that curriculum and be able to present things that in a brick and mortar school, public school, they're not going to be able to present to a child. So you're actually able to engage the child and the child's mind by giving them things and interactions that they're never going to get in a public school.
Right. And I think it also has the freedom. You were talking about your son. He sounds like a really intelligent kid. So you have the freedom now to go ahead and give him beyond what his grade level is doing in the areas that he can. I look, one of the challenges that we have faced early on is because of some of the special needs that my kids have. Writing has been a challenge for a while. I had kids that couldn't speak. And yeah. I just remember like pulling my hair, like, how do I even know if they're learning to read if they can't tell me? So we found different ways to do it. We have found different ways. This has probably been one of our best school years this year, just because it's like we finally have gotten into a pattern. We kind of know the curriculum that we like. Yeah. We have figured out different strengths. And I think I try to picture my kids going into a classroom where there's one style of learning and you're going to wait on everyone else in the classroom. And I think, how does anybody thrive?
Right. Well, yeah. And I know I was always a gifted student going through school up until high school when I really started middle school, I started getting in a lot of trouble, but for the most part, I always was in some sort of a gifted program because I did learn things really quickly. My son, I noticed, does the same thing. Now, funny, you mentioned ADHD. He is diagnosed with that. And so we found that out probably about 1.5 years ago. His doctor was like, well, his behaviors kind of show signs of ADHD. Maybe that's why he's acting out in school. And so we did go down the let's try to medicate him and see if that helped. And while it curbs his behavior, we feel like it just made him a zombie. And it was like, yeah, that's cool and all that. Yeah, there's a noticeable difference, but do I want my kid tranquilized for lack of a better term, or do I want him to be a free thinker and just, I have to accommodate changing how I react to his weird behaviors that he may or may not have. And so it was a challenge there for us. Yeah.
So my husband, I am married to an ADD man. Okay.
And I found out I am too later on, like when I was like 16, 17. So I didn't even know I was.
Right. So here's what I didn't know until I met him. It is a superpower. Mm-hmm. It is a superpower that has to be learned, right? Like how to use it. And,
how to use it properly.
Yeah, his mom was a school teacher, and again, like this is how we do school, right? Mm-hmm. I look back and what I know of him now, and it just is just parenthetically, what he described with going on medication, it takes a while to get the right dose.
Right.
For him, he is still on a combination of medication, but he also has learned, like, this is how my mind works. Right. He is a brilliant problem solver.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, if it was left up to me, we never would have found America because I wouldn't have bothered looking. He is the one that is going to find the solution to problems that I didn't realize were a problem. And when I look at my kids and I look at the different struggles or challenges, there's always a strength to it. There is always some greatness that lies within the inability, the whatever you want to call it, the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And don't give up. He ended up being an amazing student in college. And what amazes me about him is that, I got better grades. He was probably more like you. He was not malicious as a kid. He just did stuff to see what happens. Like, we were not, it makes me laugh to this day. But he remembers everything that he learned in school. Right. And I got great grades and I don't. So I'm just saying, I think that there is if I had to choose between the two of us as students, I would want my kids to be like that.
Yeah, and they used to do, it's funny because I remember I was in the newspapers this was down in Florida when I was very young, probably kindergarten, maybe first grade-ish. And they did a lot of extensive testing on me and a couple other students in the school, but me and two of them particularly were in the paper for having, being diagnosed with photographic memory. And so we did all this testing where we were in the paper and we had to do all these different challenges with different things. And then remember a bunch of stuff and like I just nailed it all. And so throughout my life, up until the teens and high school, where I really started doing things I shouldn't to really warp my mind, I guess. I kind of started to lose that a little bit, but I still have it. And I have it in an aspect where when I've been somewhere or I've seen something one time, I can describe it to you in depth, in detail. Whereas as far as memory wise, like remembering everything like I used to, I don't, but visually I can remember just like a photograph. I could describe it and point it out in my mind to you exactly how I'm seeing it from the time I saw it. And so I did, that presented challenges for me. And of course I didn't find out till I was older with ADHD. My son, when he was diagnosed, we really did we didn't want to medicate, but my wife at the same time, she's going, I am going to pull every strand of hair out of my head if he can't behave in school. And then when he comes home, gives me attitude. She's like, I can't deal with it. And some of his attitudes or some of his behaviors were not so much the attention deficit as much as kind of almost a crossover of an OCD. To where there's certain repetitious things that he had to do. And if you broke the cycle, if you for any reason disrupted what he was doing, it was a meltdown and a shutdown emotionally. And we fought with that for a while. And I mean, here, I look at the challenges we've gone through, and here he's in 6th grade, 12. He's 12 years old. He now does jujitsu, and he's been in 2 competitions and took gold and silver. After 6 months of training, the kid just went in there, and I was the horrible dad that I put him in the wrong bracket with teenagers. And so I literally 11 years old, and he went up against 14 and 15-year-old kids that had been doing this for their lives, and he won. And he pissed a lot of them off, but he did it. And partially, I believe it was part of the way he's wired. He learned jujitsu technically through the way he thinks, and through that basically the ADHD, like you said with your husband, it kind of almost helped him overcome the challenges that most people learning a new thing with like martial arts, they would have had a hard time practice to make perfect. Whereas he kind of visualized it and did it and was able to accomplish these techniques and win. And I, the bad dad, of course, put him in the wrong weight class and everything, and full submission for his first competition, and he walks away with a gold. And his second competition, he comes out with a silver and a gold. And it was very triumphant, but it was very empowering to see that he was able to do these things in transition from where we were at one stage of full meltdown and unable to really function in certain aspects where the medication noticeably helps him. But it really took time for us to set up. And again, thanking my wife for her intuitive into this is the stability and working with having patience as far as like the OCD side of how he is, making sure he has a schedule and a stable environment in every aspect of our home and every aspect of his schedule throughout the day, even when he was in public school. And that's helped a lot. Emotionally, I've watched him change. I mean, he's at that point, obviously, where he's changing a lot at his age, but emotionally, he's changed so much. And with the homeschooling, I find it to be a blessing. And now that my wife's kind of figured it out, I really see a lot, even this short amount of time, I see a lot more growth in him. And he's a kid that reads a lot. He's a kid that, when I say reads a lot, he'll read 3 or 4 books a day if you let him.
Okay.
And he's the type of kid where he doesn't, a lot of the kids these days, it's video games and phones right in their face. We don't do that in our household.
Yeah, neither do we.
Yeah, we have 3 or 4 game systems. If we're lucky to give an opportunity for that, it's just very rare. But he doesn't ask. He's not a kid that asks for the video games. He's not a kid, when he wants to go, he'll say, we'll send him outside for outside time, but he'll come in, and when he comes in and we say, hey, why don't you go play in your room, or why don't you go get an activity to do? Can I read? It's always, can I read? And we're like, hey, yeah, sure.
Sure, yeah.
Because we know at some point that's probably not going to be the case, but we're like, yeah, for now, do it. And we go to Barnes and Noble. We'll take that kid through there. He'll go in the children's section, and he'll wait for us to go do some shopping through there, but he'll read books while he's in there and finish them. Like, just read through them and finish books and tell you all about it. He loves to read.
Sounds like the ideal homeschooler, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's what I told my wife. I said, I think he's probably going to latch on to this. I know he's going to miss, and does miss, his friends. I know he misses that recess playtime, because that's really, he's like me. He's kind of the class clown. So he's got that comical side and that playful side. So I know he's like, well, now I'm at the house with mom and dad, and it's not really that cool that I could, throw something at my friend and get a laugh. But we try to, still have that entertainment. I'll walk through the room when he's doing it and throw something at him, we do stupid things that would probably happen in school anyhow.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Only now it's approved. I feel like you hit upon a thing that is so important just in general. I mean, you talk about being empowered, but don't you feel like part of it is a sense of something being in control? And I don't mean in an unhealthy way, like he's trying to control his whole environment, but in a way, it's like, I feel like the public school system as it is can work so hard to put kids into this box. Like, this is how you learn, and it's for this amount of time, and very often it's catered towards girls. Can we just can I be that blunt? Like, it's catered towards girls. Yeah. And so I think there's got to be something, especially as you guys are figuring it out. Your wife sounds amazing. Just to be getting to that point where it's like, okay, I have some say. I want to learn about fill in the blank. I'll go read about it. I have the freedom to do that. And it sounds like as parents, you're paying attention to those things that he is strong in. And I just think that some of the behavioral things, I guess maybe I'm just talking about myself. I see it in myself. Right. I reach a point where it's like, I would like to feel like I had a say about something, right? Like I can put up with a whole lot of being told what to do when I get a say in something. And I don't know. It sounds like you guys are just doing a great job with him.
We're trying. And another funny one that comes to mind when you speak about, the being in control and stuff is he has been acting out a lot lately. Just really getting, I think, more bold. Partially, I think with the jiu-jitsu, he's learning to kind of get that self-confidence, that real, I'm a tough kid, look at me go. And so he does get a little bold with my wife sometimes. And she challenges him right back. I mean, it's a full, you're not going to talk to me that way. That's disrespectful, but he does get that way sometimes. And so this past week, he got himself grounded for doing that. And so, I was like, you're grounded. I'm going to send you out to do some extra chores. And that's what we're going to rake some leaves, because we're hitting fall. We're starting to get the leaf falling here. So I was like, we're going to go rake the yard. Now we live on a 1/2-acre lot that's covered in trees. And so he'll be
raking for a while.
he'll get done with the leaves, and he gets all done. He piles them, and he comes running inside, proud of himself. And he's like, I got it done. And we're like, did you do the front yard? And he's like, oh. And then he'll do the front yard, and he'll come running in, and he's like, I got it done. And we're like, right where you started, the wind was just blowing really bad. And he'll go right out there, and there, of course, there's leaves again. And he's just like, oh. So yesterday, I was like, you got to be creative with kids, of course. I mean, as a parent, you really have to be creative. The same thing isn't going to work until they're 18 and out of your house at all, if they leave. And so it's like, I told my wife, I was like, watch this. So he gets done, and he's in the front yard, and he comes back. I'm all done with the front yard. And we tried to make the raking the leaves and bagging it fun. So we went and got pumpkin bags so he could actually make pumpkins with them, and he thought that was cool while he's grounded. And so I was like, he comes running over, I'm all done with the front. And I'm like, well, here's the mower. Go ahead and mow the back. Or I said, you can go rake leaves again. It's your choice. And he's like, he sat there for a minute like it was a trick question, like, which one's better? And is he really trying to trick me into more work? And then he's like, I'm tired of the break. I'll mow. He goes, I'll mow. That's it. And he grabs the push mower and he just starts going to mowing. And it's really cool to see that and to have an opportunity. Whereas, like you said, with public school, you're in a box. And so in public school, had he been presented with an attitude or a behavioral adjustment, and we have dealt with that in the past year, but had he been dealing with that in school, he wouldn't have got the same personalized individual attention with the behavior, let alone the consequence and discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what's kind of built up over the course of his public school time. I think is kind of built up with his behaviors, is because he's not getting any discipline. He's not getting any consequences. Last year, he broke a water fountain. He kicked in a stall door. He was stealing the teacher's supplies and then using glue in his desk and hiding it, and then having the other friends come by and kind of play with the stuff he was making in the desk with glue and kind of making goo or whatever he was trying to do as a boy, being a boy. But it was, as much as it was funny, the teacher never called us. The teacher never let us know. The teacher never called the counselor. The teacher did nothing. And we were like, when we finally found out was when he was finally kicking, he was kicking the stalls in with another kid and they got caught by a different teacher. And that teacher took action to bring him to the office and call us. And that's how we finally found out. And then, of course, the teacher tells us, oh, yeah, all this has gone on this whole year. And we're like, it's January. This has been on since day one. And she's like, well, second week of school or so. And you've been battling this every day and you didn't want to call his parents and say, can we end this, please? So again, that was so cool yesterday that I was able to give him a choice in his own discipline. But at the same time, they don't get that in public school. And I think that's one of the other great things about being able to homeschool.
Yeah. You get to decide and you get to deal with things as they happen.
Yeah. Yep. And I thought that was really cool. And another one was the other day we asked, then he's like, well, how long am I grounded? And we said, well, again, that's your choice. And we were able to give him an opportunity to choose, do I want to keep misbehaving and disrespecting my mom? Or do I want to not do that and I can actually get ungrounded if I stop? And most kids are like, yeah, I'll stop right now. And he's done that with us before and turned around and did the same thing. And we're like, well, this time it's not that easy. So this time you get to decide, but you have to show us for a few days that you can do it.
Right.
And it was kind of a thinking moment for him, like, wow, I'm in control of this situation. So I can be grounded or I cannot be grounded, but I have to behave a certain way that they're expecting.
I got to take some control of my own actions. I was watching, my sister has these just great kids, but they're very willful kids. And the 3-year-old was thrown I don't remember what the fit was about, but he had a very easy option. Like, okay, it is now bedtime. You have been throwing this fit for an hour, right? So you can either, have 2 spanks or just say, I'm sorry. And may I be excused from the table? I think that's what it was. May I be excused from the table? Cracks me up because what kid chooses spanks, right? But he kind of he scrunches up. I not say please. I take spanks. Okay, well, that's your prerogative. That's fine.
Sum that one up. Get it over with quickly.
Exactly. But it's the it's that ability to deal with it as it happens. And what an education in human nature, right? Homeschooling gives you the hardest thing I've ever done, bar none.
For sure. And the other thing I think that I'm starting to appreciate more is because we are in such a fast-paced society, and especially if you're in a household where both parents are working and stuff, what I think I'm finding more and more, and I'm discovering more and more, is the fact that we are spending more time together, whether we like it or not. We're having to interact more, where a lot of families don't. I mean, these devices stay smashed to people's faces day in and day out. Kids as well. You see kids in the waiting room at doctor's offices with iPads, and I'm like, there's no human interaction or communication going on, which means you're breaking the ties in the future relationships that you should be now building as foundations. And so what I really enjoy about it is that we are finally, and I actually wish we would have started this sooner, but we're actually able to fill the void and build these relationships now and have this open dialogue and communication throughout the day at any given moment. And encourage him to understand that the real world doesn't work on devices and texts. The real world works in face-to-face communication. I know our world is getting very techy and electronic, but I don't think there'll ever be a point where you're not going to have to face somebody at some point, whether it be employment or whatever. And so I think it's really encouraging to me to see that we're able to build as a family a stronger bond than what most we see these days have. Families are very detached these days.
Yeah, no, that's a fact. I'm convinced you preach well.
Yeah. I mean,
so
really, right? I mean, it's interesting. It really is. Tell me a little bit more about, first off, how you got to the point where you wanted to be an author, and second off, tell me about this the book Olive that you wrote.
So people have been telling me that I should write a book for probably the last 20 years. And I used to think that it meant that they saw something in me, like you must see that you have this latent talent that needs to be used, or what a great storyteller. What I finally figured out is that it was code. It was code for, I find your life a little bit overwhelming. I would like to exit this conversation. You should write a book. And so I tried. I tried for years to go ahead and write our story as a nonfiction book, write it biographically. And I would get to the end every single time and think, not even I believe this. This right. doesn't seem plausible to have 4 kids with the same incredibly rare genetic condition, right? And so a couple of years ago, I finally figured out that the key for me personally was fiction. Fiction is like this fantastic camera that you hand to a toddler, right? I don't know if you've ever done this. Our cameras are probably too nice these days to do this. But when I was growing up, like if you hand a camera to a toddler, you're going to get all these great shots of doorknobs and carpet fibers and their toes. And it enables you to pay close attention to what you want to look at. And so the reason that I have written this as fiction, and then I went ahead and reached the time in my life that it was time to write it, is because I figured out that if I wrote our story, even parts of our story, as fiction, then it gave me the freedom to cut out what I didn't really want to try to explain. So Olive is the story of the world written from the viewpoint of a nonverbal, medically fragile 5-year-old girl. Okay. You only know what she knows. You experience her home, her doctors, her world purely through her eyes. And that means that we don't know what her dad does for a living because she doesn't know. We don't know the name of her medical condition because she doesn't know. She doesn't know she has one. This is just what normal life feels like. Right. This is definitely vividly what I witnessed in my own kids. But I feel like it gave there were 2 big things that jumped out at me as I was doing it. One is that it gave me the freedom to cut out the things that are more complicated. How do you explain, genetic diseases? But it also, I feel like by doing it this way, this has the opportunity to resonate with a wide variety of people, because there are so many commonalities. That's what I'm looking for. There's so many commonalities in Olive's experience. If you have ever been bullied, then Olive is your kind of people. If you have ever experienced harvest time and getting a pumpkin with your dad, then Olive is your kind of people. And if you've ever encountered what it feels like to have a best friend, to have one person that just completely understands you, then her story is relevant for you. And I think that if I had written it more biographically, if I had written it about mitochondrial disease, then it would have made sense to a very small sliver of people. As it is, I think that it's a story that's going to resonate with readers young and old. That's my experience so far.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And you speak about the mitochondrial disease. That's not something that's just, that's not a rare situation. That's all around the world. We hear about that. Correct?
It's definitely becoming
more prominent.
More understood, I would say. So if you talk to 50 different mitochondrial patients, you will get 50 very different experiences. The thing that they have in common is energy production. Your mitochondria is the part of your cell that takes food and turns it into energy. And so what they're finding through research is that there are a lot of medical conditions that we have known about for years, diabetes and heart failure, things that we can actually trace back and find that it is connected to mitochondrial disease. And that's why it's starting to look more common. It's still a pretty rare disease to have, especially in kids. I think, I won't even quote the statistics. I'm terrible at keeping track of them. But it was, especially when my kids were diagnosed, it was pretty rare. But they are definitely doing research. And I suspect that over the course of decades, we'll find that there's all kinds of medical conditions that that can be traced back to a malfunctioning, a disordered mitochondria in some way.
Right.
You think about everything in the human experience that requires energy, right?
It's all affected.
Yeah, your organ function, your speech, your development, your sleep, your ability to eat, all of that requires energy. And so anything that requires energy is at risk in a mitochondrial disease.
Interesting. That's really interesting. What are, we've been touching a lot on this show about helping others, and what that looks like. I mean, sometimes that looks like a self-help book or a self-help coach, which we have a lot on the show. But the main thing that I've been trying to convey to my audience for probably the past 2 weeks on a lot of our social media lives, as well as for this month of mental health awareness, is really sometimes helping other people helps yourself. And what I see just from talking to you this little bit about, we had a guest on last week, two guests, as a matter of fact, came on. And just before we started recording, we were just talking a little bit. And one was an author of a book, self-help book of all things. And the other one was kind of a life coach. And we got on, and before we started, I mentioned, like I did to you, like we're kind of talking about self-help. We're kind of talking about helping others. And both of them had the same answer originally, is I honestly feel bad because I don't know how I help others. And I said, you wrote a book about self-improvement. And of course, like bells and whistles go off, and, oh, I guess I do, And then the other guy was I was like, you coach people. What do you mean? Like you have an audience of people you're helping. Whether one person gets it or none of them get it, that's what you're doing to help. And with your situation, what I'm hearing in just this conversation with what you've told us about, homeschooling 4 kids that have this mitochondrial disease, is you're helping, as a mother, you're a mother of these 4 kids, but you're helping them. Yeah. And in general with your book, you're helping others, like you said, through the viewpoint of Olive, you're able to assist and help other people. What can you share with our audience, maybe a little bit about not just helping others, but how helping others kind of helps you?
I think that writing this book has been probably more for me than for anyone else, although I like to think that yes, that people will be helped by reading it. It's fiction, but it's amazing how fiction can inform what we do. We bring our own stories to everything that we read, and I'm fascinated to see what people take from it. I guess I am struck, Mental Health Awareness Month, right? I think back through my early days of being a special needs mom and realizing that all of a sudden I don't get to just be a parent anymore. I get to be an advocate, right, a caretaker. You're never allowed to just be a parent anymore.
You're a parent, you're a nurse, you're everything.
You're everything, yeah. Right? And I think I look back and I had years where the grief was so heavy upon me, combined with pretty incredible sleep deprivation. I did not realize that the way that I was feeling could ever change. Now, in a lot of ways, my situation hasn't changed. We still have 2 feeding tubes in our house. Yep. We still have to live a different life that is wrapped up around energy and how do we get enough calories and how do we get enough, we go to hospitals. But I feel differently about it now. I like my life. Right. I have figured out over the course of many years now that your life doesn't have to be normal to be great. And I think that is, if I had an encouragement for your listeners today, it would be that the way that you feel right now is not how you're going to keep feeling. Now, it could be that from where you stand today, you could be sitting thinking, well, I feel okay. It seems fine. Yeah. It's going to change. You're going to go through times that are worse. And you could be there right now where it just seems so dark that you cannot see that there is a way out. And even if the situation remains, you will not stay feeling like you do right now. And I wish that I had understood that early on. Sometimes we just have to keep going until it starts to change. For me, I did start keeping, it sounds so cheesy when I say it out loud, but I did start keeping a gratitude journal. Yes. Because there is something, we can make our minds look for what is excellent in our lives, but it's a discipline. It's almost like a muscle that you have to work. For me, the muscle I have to work. And when I did, I started realizing that actually my life is chock full of things that I love, that I'm happy about. Sometimes when I look back at my very early gratitude journals, it really does look like soap bubbles.
Right.
Boy, I like how soap bubbles look. Like, it could be that you're not able to go, big picture yet. I think it's that same idea, like I was saying with fiction. Sometimes you have to go ahead and hand the camera to the toddler so that you can see the really small and awesome things about your life.
Yep.
I think that that's what Olive does in the book. I think that that is probably key for a lot of people that have had their normal turned upside down right now, is to hand the camera to the toddler. It's going to change.
And I think we've all, I mean, obviously across the board around the globe, I can say everybody's life's been turned upside down. I mean, obviously, and everybody deals with and copes with things differently, obviously. So, I mean, in the middle of this pandemic, while one family may be hunkering down in their house, another family is out there trying to keep a business afloat. So obviously, you know, there's extreme dynamics to what we're all dealing with in this world. But we have such divisiveness going on and just other crazy stuff going on in the world. But you know, I had a lady, what you were just touching on just brought a thought to my head. I had a lady guest on my show last week. Lois was her name, amazing lady. And she talked a lot about shame and guilt was her big topic. That's something she wrote a book about, something she really studies and just is real firm on. You know, you've got to get rid of the shame that you hold for whatever incident may have happened, or in the way self-talk, the way you talk to yourself. Over years of doing that, you build shame and you build guilt. And some people just kind of hold it different than others. And one of the things she made a good point about is, like you said, a gratitude journal. She encouraged the same thing. She said, you know, make a gratitude journal. Make one, if you have to, a second one, make it more personal. And she said, when I say make it personal, she's like, describe something you care about yourself each day. And if you want to write several entries a day, she said, that's fine too, but focus on one thing a day. And she said, and you can never, ever repeat the same thing again in the journal, ever. And she said, try to do that. And she said, you'll be amazed at how you start off in a very shallow realm. And it's something as simple as like, well, I like the way my hair looks today, or I like this outfit that I bought yesterday. And she said, and then slowly you can't use any of those things again. And she said, so it gets to a point where you start digging really deep into yourself. And it's kind of like what I always use as an example in my life and what I've had to do to overcome challenges of addiction and alcoholism and all the things I've went through. Is for me, it's looking in a mirror, I call it. And for her, it was, you really got to dig deeper, because you have to find things that you like about yourself. But once you can't repeat them again, once you've verbalized them or wrote them down and you can't repeat them, it's a challenge to continue to deeply love yourself, to get deeper into loving things about who you are. And it also helps you on the journey of knowing more about who you are. Just a very encouraging statement she made. And I never thought, I do a journal. It's, like you said, it seems silly. And of course, I'm not going to tell my masculine friends, but I do journal. I've been doing it for years through counseling and stuff. I started doing it with some of my counselors when I was younger. And I try to keep up with that. My wife does journals. We have Devin, my son, does journals. You know, we make that a habit. But when she said that, it was very profound, because I started thinking again, just like she was explaining it, is, what if I can't repeat what I like about myself ever again? I have to acknowledge it. I have to say it, but then have to start describing the good of me, or what's inside of me. I have to start describing these things. I have to get deeper, because it can't just be physical. It can't just be, I like my features. I like my clothes. Now I have to get into, I like the way I treat people. I like the way, and I can't repeat that one again. So now I've got to get to, so slowly you dig really deep in yourself. It was so encouraging.
I have to think about that, because there's a little part of me that maybe is just ornery, that's like, now hold on, but don't we repeat the things that we're really excited about? I don't know. I have repetitions that I really like. I feel like yes. The world is designed with repetition. That sun comes up every single morning. I have to think about that.
Yeah. You've given and again, it challenged me, because I was like, kind of like you were thinking. I'm like, well, you know, how do you not say these things? You're gonna say these things, or you're gonna think these things. And she's like, well, it's deeper than that. You know, you're basically challenging yourself to look into parts that, you know, again, you're having to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into things you love about yourself and things you like about yourself, especially when you're in a part like her story. She was just a very dark place, and the shame and guilt was just consuming her life. And she was just like, that's where, you know, I had to continue to find ways to love myself. And if I just every day woke up and said, well, this outfit looks great, I did my hair, I'm good, and I'm out the door. She goes, I was avoiding avoiding who I am, and I was losing my identity in the guilt and the shame and the depression. And she's like, she made a very good point of it. And like you said, I was kind of challenging it, like, well, you want to every day do, you have a routine, you do certain things, but it was neat how she just kind of challenged me on thinking deeper and taking a closer and deeper look. And I've been on a self-help journey. It started about 6 years ago. And I've really taken time to really focus on changing my emotional, my spiritual, really focusing on who I am, who I want to be, the legacy I want to leave behind, not just as my life, but as on a daily basis, on a minute-to-minute basis. What legacy do I have with this conversation on this podcast? What legacy do I leave behind today in the moment I'm spending time with my wife or my son? So I've been challenging myself that way for about 6 years. I've been just trying to make habits that I always had that were bad habits, trying to turn them around into good habits, but then also making them where it's not something I have to think about, and it becomes second nature. It's just something I'm doing. And that's been a real hard challenge to break my old cycles and get back into being a better person, being a better husband, better father. So I've been working hard on that. In the past 2 years, I've really focused more on physical side of my changes. And so I've tried to get back in the gym, working out and being healthy, eating right, having a better diet. And, while they all tie together in balance, I think what I found the most that seems to bring, and I asked this question earlier on our Facebook page, is what does success mean to you? And so I'll ask you the question, what does success mean to you, and have you achieved it?
Success means to me loving the life that I have. And yes, I have.
There we go. And see, I had a lot of people exact same answer. And I felt the same way is it's literally finding a point where you're happy in your life, happy with who you see in the mirror, happy with the people that are in your circle. And then I had a lot of varying answers. Obviously I had a few people that were like, nope, absolutely not successful. I had a few people that were like, oh yeah, totally. As soon as I get a career where I'm making this much money, X amount of money, I'm good. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, let me know how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, I would respond with, that many a man has kind of stumbled on that platform of putting which one goes first. And, do you want to have the mental, physical, and spiritual health, or do you want to really just have finances? While we all live in the real world and you have to pay bills, yeah, of course we all want to be financially stable enough to pay our bills or be sustained. But as a whole, I think success is exactly like you said. It's reaching a point where you've overcome quite a bit, but you're in a happier state in your life where you can literally look around and it's not grief, it's not turmoil, and you're content with who you are as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that I think that contentment can happen amidst the grief.
Yes.
Someone asked me recently in an interview. How am I going to say about bucket lists? I got to remember how he specified it. Okay, so do you have anything incomplete on your bucket list? And I had to admit that, there are people that make lists and there are people that don't. And I am not a person that makes lists. I'll preface with that. But on principle, I don't have a bucket list because I want to be someone that gets to the end of every single day, looks back at what I did, declares that to be the bucket list, flips the bucket upside down and props my feet up. That's who I want to be. Mm-hmm. I want to get to the end of every day and say, I did what I want to do, and I wanted to do what I did. I don't like the idea of having this out there list of things that, what if I die today and I haven't seen Spain? Like, do I want to see Spain? Sure, sounds great. I hear the paella is excellent. But I don't want to be living my life that way. I'd like to be living my life. Yeah, I'd like to be living my life paying attention now and saying, you know what? I love that I managed to feed them yet again. Boom. I think I want my satisfaction in work to be like that.
And that's exactly what because everybody kind of chimed in the question, and about a third of the way down, I chimed in my own. And that's exactly one of the statements I made was living is basically in a nutshell, I summed it up as kind of living in the moment. So my successes aren't, I don't look at my overall life and then compare that to like, this is success. I look at what today brings. And I look at the smaller successes throughout my life. And nowadays it's the day, the moment. It's, did I get through this interview? That's a success. Did I go outside and my wife doesn't have my son strung up by his ankle because he's misbehaving? That's a success.
Oh,
Um,
hugely. Yeah.
right.
Everyone's still breathing. Nobody's
Yeah.
died.
And,
I am a winner today. Yeah.
that's it. And so, yeah, I kind of look at the success as, I guess, and again, I asked that question partially because I really like to see the perspective, different people's perspective. I love seeing other people's opinions. It helps me to kind of understand other people. And for me, it is that was my answer. My answer genuinely was my successes are multiple daily. They could be many different successes throughout my day. Getting through a meal, getting to work from work, going out in public and not coming home and not sick, in this day and age. There's just so many things where it's like, it's a success. And today was successful. And so I like to look at things, I guess, in a smaller, more of a micro versus a macro. And that's kind of where I'm at nowadays. Is like my successes are daily, every day. So when someone says, I had a bad day today, or I had a bad day yesterday, I can say, I didn't have a bad day yesterday. There was many things that were successful yesterday. There was many things I succeeded in yesterday that I probably can't accomplish today the same. And just that, so I put that out there. I try to give a lot of encouragement to our audience. I try to give a lot of encouragement to the people that do follow us. And I'm, due to my journey and who I am, I'm huge on helping other people, and I'm huge on self-help. I feel like we're in a huge, crazy society, in a crazy world that we're living in. And there's no amount of kindness that's too much, and it doesn't cost anything to be kind or to share a moment. I've been encouraging people to hold doors, just a smile to someone, and you're crossing paths in a store or something, just a smile, a compliment. If you're going through a drive-through, buy the meal behind you and drive off, buy their meal. And so I've been encouraging these things for several reasons. Obviously, mental health awareness. Obviously, things I've gone through where somebody has been encouraging to me or nice to me at a moment in my life, and I caught it and I recognized it. Even in my low points in my life, I recognized somebody being kind to me, and it meant something. And those same people are in my life today. Maybe saved my life, to be honest. And that's kind of the message we've been talking a lot about. And I'm glad to have guests like you that are sharing experiences that you're going through. Being a mother with mitochondrial children, you're dealing with so much. Like you said, you're a mother, you're a nurse, you're doing so many things. So you have all these challenges, but you're sharing with our audience the overcoming part of it. And we never know what someone's going through in passing. You can look someone right in the eye at a convenience store, and that person could have just left their house from an abusive spouse. That person could also be going through a suicidal moment where they're suicidal and just waiting on the moment to take their own life. And if we all take one moment to share a compliment, a smile, hold a door, that's enough to remove that person from that moment of grief for just a second, just a split second, which is probably enough, can be enough to save their life for that moment.
Yeah. It takes them out of the current moment.
Yeah.
Right.
And it could be even the abusive spouse we run into. And that moment we're kind to that person could be possibly enough to change them from going home and beating the wife or beating the kids or doing something that just is horrific. And so I just encourage those things. And I'm so glad I had you on, because I do feel that I know there's people in the audience that will be encouraged by your story. We'll definitely want to check the book out and be encouraged by the book. But I really feel like you hit it on the head as far as like, you're the exact guest that I think the audience during this time that we're discussing about mental health and all the other things going on in the world, you're the guest people need to hear from. Your perspective is good.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed being here. This is a lot of fun.
For sure. And in the future, I'd love to invite you back, and we'll discuss a lot of the other things that I've kind of dug up and looked at, and we can dig a little deeper in some of the conversation we've had.
Yeah, anytime. You
For
give me a
sure.
holler. I'd love to come back.
Just for the audience, where's a place they can get your book, and where can they maybe get some more information about maybe you, or just kind of following some of the things you look into?
Okay, so you can find me on my website, which is just awful to spell. I apologize in advance, but it's my name. It's BARBARAENDLEIN.com. You can find links to the books there, to the book. You can also get it off of Atmosphere Press. They are my publisher. You can listen to me on the Deciding Factor podcast. And if you figured out how to spell my name the first time, you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you. And we look forward to having you back. You have a great day. And I always encourage all our guests, as well as the audience, to just make sure we help one person today. And obviously, you've got plenty to help. So I would just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, but always take time for yourself.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for talking to me today.
You have a great day.
You too.